Another day and another one of those times where you just never know what you're going to see out there on the water, kind of like this scene here, which was a few weeks back when a cargo ship wound up running into a bridge over in Russia. And as many of you know, we've seen several instances just like this over the past several months, but just one of the wild things we'll see in this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. Our first story to make the boating news this week is going to take us up to Massachusetts, where this was the scene just this past weekend, when a man decided to take his boat out for a weekend of fun on Lake Winnipesaukee when all of a sudden he hit a wake, was ejected from the boat, and was not wearing the safety kill switch lanyard, prompting the scene we see here, where a jet ski wound up having to chase the boat down after the man was knocked off of it, and one of the passengers jumps on board the vessel to take control of the boat that was spinning around the lake. Fortunately, due to the quick actions of the Good Samaritan seen in the images here, no injuries were reported, neither was any serious damage reported during this incident. Another piece of noteworthy news, the 17-year-old who actually jumped onto the boat did sign up for the US Navy and will be heading to boot camp at the end of the summer. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us across the pond over to the UK, where just a few days ago this was a scene on a beach in Cornwall, when all of a sudden beachgoers got a little more than an ice cream treat that they expected to get while they were down there, when a Kelly Whip van decided to go ahead and pull up onto the beach to give beachgoers an opportunity to buy some ice cream. But all of a sudden the van, when it was about time to leave, got stuck in the sand, and the next thing they knew, the tide came back in, overtaking the van and carrying it out to sea. Fortunately, in this situation, the ice cream man was able to get out of the truck before it was carried away. Several rescue attempts were made before the van was floating away, as we see in these images here. A four-wheel drive vehicle was first enlisted to try and pull it off the beach. Unfortunately, the front tires were too sunk at the time for them to be able to get it out, and even beachgoers hooked a line to the van and attempted to pull it back to the beach. Fortunately, in this situation, no injuries were reported. Coast Guard and local authorities stayed with the van until the tide came back out. After the tide went all the way back out, the owner of the van was able to enlist a tractor to go ahead and pull the van back off the beach. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us up to Wisconsin, where this was the scene just this past holiday weekend, when 4 people had to be rescued off their boat after they wound up crashing it on a rock wall near Kewanee Lighthouse up in Wisconsin. The boaters were out enjoying a 4th of July evening boating trip around 10:30 p.m. when they were on their way back to the harbor when they wound up hitting the rock wall. The crew was out enjoying fireworks on the water and was unable to see the rock wall at the time. A Good Samaritan who was on the water witnessed the event and wound up contacting the local authorities to get help out to the scene to get the 4 rescued off the boat. Fortunately, in this situation, no life-threatening injuries were reported, but this was not the only vessel to find itself on the rocks this past week, as this was the scene over in Southern California as well. Local authorities and Coast Guard remind you, if you're gonna go boating at night, make sure you have a working GPS and operate at much slower speeds so you don't find yourself in this situation as well. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Greece, and some of these images may look familiar, as apparently I'm finding out this is not an uncommon scene, as this is the scene when a ferry came rolling into port in Skopelos, Greece. Now, I remember about a year ago, some images very similar to this came out as well. Apparently, this is still an issue here, which just blows my mind. This harbor is a protected harbor that's set up just a little funky. As we see on one side, there's going to be a wall where all your local pleasure craft or people who are visiting the harbor can tie up to spend the night. But in this same protected harbor, on the opposite side is actually a commercial port that handles a ferry ship that comes in quite frequently. And whenever that ferry ship comes in, if they come in and things are just a little off, we get the images we see here from the ferry kicking its wake up and banging all these boats around. But what blows my mind is that this has to be a known fact, that this happens pretty frequently in this port. So what blows my mind the most is that boats still dock here. Let me know in the comments below, would you dock your boat at a port like this where you know there's a possibility that if the ferry comes in, you could wind up in a situation like this or your boat's absolutely getting banged around? Thanks for watching, crew. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening out on your waterways, be sure to hit us up on Facebook or Instagram and let us know, and you might see your stories over here, just like Rich Bono and Alex Richardson did this week. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button here.